I'll take an extra 40 if you guys want me to. Who would like to begin? So, if you would, let's bow for a word of prayer, shall we? Our Father, we thank you for this day. We ask you blessings on this day, on this time together. We hope and pray, Father, that this time together will make us better people during the week. And we just hope and pray that you will be with us during the week, that you will give us the strength to be good witnesses, and the grace to overcome the things that so easily tempt us to do wrong. Bless this time together. Watch over each and every one of us this day and this week. We pray in Christ's name. Amen. Let's start with who is your favorite apostle and why?
Peter.
Huh?
Peter.
Peter is your favorite. Why is Peter your favorite?
Just like Peter puts his foot in his mouth.
That's an interesting reason to like him. I kind of get that. He blurts, doesn't he? He just gets puts stuff right out.
Just right up there.
Very interesting, you know, what Jen and I grew up Catholic, when you go through the sacrament of confirmation, you're supposed to choose a name. I mean, at least almost every kid chose either Peter or John. Probably because those are the most prominent, those are the ones they know. All right, Peter's in it. Does anybody else like Peter for a different reason? Yeah, Jack? Yeah, hang on a second, Jack.
Because he's the most like me.
He's the most like you? Are you a blurter too, Jack? You just kind of right out there with stuff?
Yeah, and sometimes before thinking about it.
Okay.
And not terribly consistent.
Okay. All right. Probably a lot more of us who wouldn't admit that, Jack, but there's more of us like that. Yeah, you over here.
So is my husband in here?
You know he'll hear about this. You know that, don't you?
He always said that he thought Peter got a bad rap because Peter was very passionate, and my husband tends to be very passionate about things and gets very excited about things quickly that he's passionate about.
Okay.
So that's not negative.
Okay, no, it's not. It's not at all. You're right. Peter is very passionate, but I mean, his passion sometimes kind of got him in trouble. Anybody else have somebody different that they like? Some other apostle? Jen?
I like John.
Okay. And why do you like John?
When I read the Gospel of John, you know, when you read something that someone has written, you're hearing very much how they think and what is in them. They're pouring themselves out. I mean, it's him and the Holy Spirit, I realize, but there's a way that he differs from the others, and I just like what I hear him saying and how he approaches life.
Okay. Can you give us an example of what it is you like about him?
I like in his Gospels, just that's the only way I can, you know, obviously it talks about love all the time, but I like all the particulars of all the individuals that the situations that are talked about.
Okay.
And I just like how he handles himself in various situations.
Okay. Okay. He definitely has a unique perspective among the Gospels, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Sees Jesus trying to get people to think about spiritual matters. Yes, right here.
Oh, and he knew that Jesus loved him.
Okay.
I got reminded about that a lot.
Yeah, something about it, the interesting relationship there. Maybe it was even kind of like David and Jonathan. You know, they really seem to really like each other. It's very interesting. I will tell you that I like Nathaniel. Not known very much, but if you look in the first chapter of John, Jesus calls him a man in whom there is no guile. Which is a very interesting character compliment, isn't it? What you saw in Nathaniel is what you got. He wasn't a person who was deceptive, just was a person who was a man of integrity, I think. I mean, I like a lot of the other apostles, but I just happen to like that particular characteristic that Jesus pointed it out to him. That's what he wanted. We don't know too much about any others. Is there anybody else want to chime in on who their favorite apostle was? Or is? All right, who is your favorite New Testament character? And why? Just move out of the apostles. All right, Jan, she's got another one here. Good. All right.
Barnabas.
Barnabas, okay.
I just felt like Barnabas he wasn't full of himself. And he was very, he built others up, which is what I think we're supposed to be doing in the church.
Yeah.
And he took people and mentored them, and, you know, you didn't have to be perfect to be with him. He just saw the potential. I think Jesus did that a lot. He saw people's potential.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's admirable. He must have had self-confidence or God confidence. One or the other, maybe both.
Okay. Someone else? Really, when you think about it, when we see the gospel kind of in flesh and blood in people's lives, that's an encouragement at a whole different level, isn't it, than just reading about somebody. I mean, we can imagine what it would have been like to be around Barnabas. I would have liked to have been around Barnabas. Just seemed like one of these persons didn't have a bad word to say about anybody. I'm sort of maybe extrapolating a little bit, but he was such an encourager that you get that impression. Does anybody else have a favorite character?
Can we include Jesus?
Sure, that's the most obvious.
For a whole bunch of reasons.
Yeah, that's the most obvious, isn't it? And he is our model for a whole bunch of reasons. Let me throw another unusual character in. I don't know why I seem to gravitate to these really unusual types. You don't know much about them. But in 2 Timothy, chapter 1, verses 16 through 18, Paul mentions somebody. Mentions a name. Part of the reason I like characters like this individual is because, number one, you don't always hear much about them. It's like going through Romans 16. Look at all the different friends and people that Paul greets in Romans 16. And think about the little tidbits of information he says about them, how close he was to them. I think there's even some who were his fellow Israelites, and I think he said they preceded me in the faith. So he had some connection with them for some reason. But I like people like that because I think I'm more like them. I think I'm more like the people who don't get the big name recognition and maybe don't care. Don't need the big name recognition to be able to be faithful to God. Listen to this. May the Lord grant mercy to the household of Onesiphorus. Nobody would know that just because they can't pronounce the name probably. Because he often refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chains. On the contrary, when he was in Rome, he diligently searched for me and found me. May the Lord grant that he obtained mercy from him on that day. You know very well how much he ministered at Ephesus. That's the only place in the New Testament he's mentioned. And think about how many other nameless servants there were in that time you just don't know about. They did what God asked them to do. I'm sure there are many who weren't. There's enough bad examples in the New Testament. But it's people like that that give me encouragement. Because I know I can just serve in what... I say little ways. I'm not so sure our service can be broken down into little and big ways. I think whatever we do is big for God. However we serve is what God wants us to do. All right, real quick, what's your favorite Old Testament character? There's a reason I'm going through all this. I want us to just kind of get to thinking about the people in the Bible.
Joseph.
Joseph. Who said that? Okay, why do you like Joseph?
He was constantly given lemons and he made lemonade.
Okay, interesting way to express it, yeah. Constantly given lemons. Put in jail, accused of this, accused of that, sent by his brothers. Boy, betrayed, really. That was betrayal by his brothers. To the, of the worst kind, family betrayal. Which might say something about Jonathan here. We'll get into that in just a minute. All right.
Moses,
Moses, okay?
because we're shown how much he grew
Okay,
in faith and in leadership.
okay.
I think about Esther, who as a young woman took a very powerful stand with the help of, Mordecai, of course, but stood for what was right even though it was terribly difficult.
Yeah, one of the more unique positions of anybody in the Old Testament, wasn't she? Yeah. She literally put her life on the line. She had to risk her life to do that. Yeah, great person. All right, let's move into, we're actually looking at chapter 9 in the book, and that's based on 1 Samuel chapter 20. So let's turn and open up to 1 Samuel chapter 20 for a little bit. Let's kind of throw out a little bit of speculation here. Some of those individuals that you mentioned, that you admire, what would happen in your estimation of that person if they did something really bad and they demonstrated some of the worst kind of character flaws? How would you, what would you still think about them? Yeah. What would you have thought about David if you only had seen what he did later on with Bathsheba and Uriah?
Well, that means you saw it.
Yeah. But if you only knew that political scandal, would you vote for him again? If it were something you had to vote on? Probably not. My point here is really pretty simple. Think about what Jonathan was going through with his father. He is Saul's son. And he's got to cope with something in his family that it looks like to me he hasn't quite fully grasped yet, or hasn't quite fully come to the realization of what his father is doing. At least that's the way it looks to me. Let's go through this and see. Jonathan is just, to me, and to Janet alike, we both love this character. He is one of the, to me, preeminent disciples, if you want to call him a disciple. I think we'll just use that term, in the Old Testament. Where would Paul be without Barnabas? Needed somebody to stand up for him. Where would David be without Jonathan? Not so sure. God could have done it any other way, but he chose another individual, like Jonathan, to kind of move him along, to kind of give him the encouragement that he needed at the time that David really needed some encouragement. David's going through a real trial here because he doesn't understand why Saul is after him. He's not quite grasped that yet. That will become more and more clear, I think, as he goes through here. But let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about Jonathan dealing with his father and dealing with David. Think about the character of Jonathan himself. So we'll start in 1 Samuel 20. In fact, really just going to stay in that particular text here. Can I get someone to read chapter 21, just verses 1 and 2?
Then David fled to Naamah in Ramoth and came and said before Jonathan, "What have I done? What is my guilt? And what is my sin before your father, that he seeks my life?" And he said to him, "Far from it, you shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing either great or small without discussing it with me. And why should my father hide this from me? It is not so."
So, What's going on in Jonathan's mind at this point?
It's in denial.
Who said that? Yeah, he is. He's in denial, isn't he? I don't necessarily want you to tell me some of the family struggles that you've had, but if you've had them, and you've had some people in your family who have not always done very good things, maybe done some really bad things, do you believe it when you first hear about it? You don't want to believe it, do you? That's your family. This is Jonathan's father we're talking about here. Whatever his flaws, whatever he's done already, he's still Jonathan's father. My suspicion is that I think you're right. He's in denial at this point. He does not want to accept the fact that Saul is seeking his life. I don't know whether he just doesn't know about what's going on in chapter 19. Maybe he's heard about it, but he's not sure what's going on, or he just doesn't want to believe it. Just doesn't want to believe that his father would stoop that low for no good reason. Okay? So he's probably in a little bit of denial here. How about verses 3 through 9? 3 through 9.
Yet David vowed again, saying, "Your father knows well that I have found favor in your sight." And he has said, "Do not let Jonathan know this, or he will be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, there is hardly a step between me and death." Then Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." So David said to Jonathan, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I ought to sit down to eat with the king. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field until the third evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, 'David earnestly asked leave of me to run to Bethlehem, his city, because it is the yearly sacrifice there for the whole family.' If he says, 'It is good,' your servant will be safe. But if he is very angry, know that he has decided on evil. Therefore deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. But if there is iniquity in me, put me to death yourself. For why then should you bring me to your father?" Jonathan said, "Far be it from me. For if I should indeed learn that evil has been decided by my father to come upon you, then would I not tell you about it?"
Okay. So, tell me about what is this? Tell me about this discussion here. What's going on?
Putting Saul to the test.
Putting Saul to the test. Putting Jonathan to the test.
He's
Basic.
giving him a chance to discover it for himself without him having to argue
Okay.
and start rock feelings. He's just like, okay, there's a way for you to discover it for yourself, and we can still be good friends.
Okay. Okay. David's kind of asking Jonathan to lie, isn't he? That's another whole issue. I won't go into that. That's kind of what he's doing. He has to lie to his father, but it's a way of uncovering what's going on. So he's giving him a chance. What is this business about the covenant between he and David? I think chapter 18. When Jonathan talks to David after David has just killed Goliath, they make a covenant or an agreement between the two of them. The details are unimportant for me at this point. Just the fact is, in one sense, they're referring back to that covenant they've made with each other, haven't they? I mean, it sounds like it was not just an unspoken agreement that they really liked each other, but there was something firm about it, that they had made an agreement with each other, that they would kind of always be friends, or they would always do what was good for each other, and specifically they would always do what would be good for their families down the road. Okay, and if you know the history of this, you know that later on in 2 Samuel, David takes care of Jonathan's crippled son. Okay, so it's one of the ways that David makes good on this covenant. So why do you think they're bringing this covenant thing up? don't know, maybe I'm trying to probe this too deeply here, but there's just something to me that reflects Jonathan's character here about that.
He knows unlike his father, he sticks to his word.
He sticks to his word. That's critical here, isn't it? I gave you my word, I'm going to stick with that. Psalm 15 and verse 4. The whole list of things in Psalm 15 about the person who is acceptable to God. Verse 4, one who keeps his word, whatever the cost. That's how mine reads. He keeps his word, whatever the cost. Is this going to be costly for Jonathan to keep his word to David? Sure it is. It's going to be very costly. And in fact, Saul's going to pull out something here later on that's going to tell us why it was so costly for Jonathan. It was okay. Kind of okay. Okay, so we'll skip down a little bit here. I don't know if I want to start on that just yet. Yeah, all right, let's hold off on, I had question 2 here that I wanted to talk about, that we had a question 2 in the back of the book. Let's hold off on that just for a minute or 2. And let's jump over to beginning at middle of verse 24 and go down, let's read all the way through 34. 24 to 34. 1 Samuel.
So David hid in the field, and when the new moon feast came, the king sat down to eat. He sat in his customary place by the wall, opposite Jonathan, and Abner sat next to Saul, but David's place was empty. Saul said nothing that day, for he thought something must have happened to David to make him ceremonially unclean. Surely he is unclean. But the next day, the second day of the month, David's place was empty again. Then Saul said to his son Jonathan, "Why hasn't the son of Jesse come to the meal, either yesterday or today?" Jonathan answered, "David earnestly asked me for permission to go to Bethlehem. He said, 'Let me go, because our family is observing a sacrifice in the town, and my brother has ordered me to be there. If I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away to see my brothers.' That is why he has not come to the king's table." Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan, and he said to him, "You son of a perverse and rebellious woman, don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame, and to the shame of the mother who bore you? As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send someone to bring him to me, for he must die." "Why should he be put to death? What has he done?" Jonathan asked his father. But Saul hurled his spear at him to kill him. Then Jonathan knew that his father intended to kill David. Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger. On that second day of the feast, he did not eat, because he was grieved at his father's shameful treatment of David.
I don't know if the writer here cleaned up Saul's language. I mean, this is about as nasty as it gets. Not only insults Jonathan, he insults Jonathan's mother. Anyway, he's pretty mad. Jonathan gives what he and David agreed upon to say. And the first day everything seems okay. Saul doesn't say, I don't know how we know what Saul was thinking here, but somehow somebody must have realized that he thought David was ceremonially unclean. Okay, which seems like a reasonable thing for a reasonable person to think, doesn't it? He's giving David a break the first day. Second day, not so much. Second day, it's just too much for Saul. So he explodes. Is that a good way to describe what Saul does here? He explodes with anger. We're not just talking about, I'm a little miffed. I am really angry. All right, this is an explosive anger here. And to the point where he tries to kill his own son. Think about that. Think about that. You know, as the story goes on, one of the characteristics of Jonathan that is so, to me, outstanding, he's still loyal to his father, even after all this. almost loyal to a fault. It might be the way we would think of it, but he's still loyal to his father. That's remarkable that this person has that kind of depth of character. So how does Saul appeal to Jonathan to get on his side? Of course, he insults him at first, which is probably not a good way to get it started. But what does he tell Jonathan that is going to be a problem if he sides with David?
He's gonna lose his kingdom.
You're not going to be the king. All right. Now we're looking at a monarchy. We're looking at what is customary, probably not only in ancient Near East, but in areas where the monarchy is the ruling way of governing the people. Usually, you know, the next king are the heirs, are the descendants of the king. Jonathan was next in line. So, what's Saul trying to do here?
He's trying to entice him with money and power.
Yeah.
Saying you're going to lose this. He's going to
Okay.
get it.
Yeah. It's a kind of manipulation, isn't it? It's very interesting, too, because later on, when Saul is confronting some of his officers about why they haven't told him where David is, he says, "Aren't I the one that pays your salary?" Basically, that's what he says to them later on. We'll see that in a later chapter. This is, I think, right around the time where Saul has all the priests of God killed. But that's what he says to them. You know, I'm the guy that pays your salary. Does that sound familiar to anybody? That's the way of the world in some ways, isn't it? Okay. You want to be a person of integrity, you're probably going to lose something in the process. It could be financial. It could be something else. How does Jonathan feel about that? He doesn't seem to. For what all we can see about Jonathan, that's okay with him. All right? In fact, he will tell David later on, "You're going to be the king, and I'm okay with that." And as I mentioned in the beginning of the chapter, to me, there's a certain amount of sadness, perplexity as to why God didn't allow Jonathan to live on and serve with David. But somehow it was God's plan to take Jonathan, not to have Jonathan and David continue on. I don't know, it just would have seemed to me that I would have written that story a little differently.
Yes, but after Saul and Jonathan are killed, David still has trouble taking the kingdom.
Yes, he does.
So if Jonathan had lived, that side that kind of was giving David would have more strength.
Well-
because they would be, didn't have Jonathan.
Well, exactly. So why doesn't God just allow Jonathan to continue on? I don't know. It would have made sense to me to have that happen, and you wouldn't have had this long civil war in 2 Samuel. But you and I aren't writing this story. We are not writing this story. God is writing this story. God is the one who's, he's got his hand in this, doesn't he? So he uses a guy like Jonathan, who is willing to do whatever God wants, not what is maybe best for him in terms of, his own aggrandizement, whatever it might be. Yes.
To take that a step further, why didn't God just kill off Saul and let Jonathan come to power?
Yeah, that's, I don't know. I think somebody mentioned last week, well, maybe there was a message in there as to how this proceeded was to show people how bad things could get with the wrong type of person. I don't know, that we can speculate on what God is doing. We don't always know his thinking. We know what he did. And this is what he did. But he brought Jonathan into David's life. Very interesting that he brings a man like Jonathan into David's life. Have you ever struggled with relationships that have tried to keep you from living out your faith? Family, otherwise, or otherwise. Everybody had an experience of that? I mean, I know you have. Everybody has in some way or other. Anybody want to share with us some of the things they've had to experience because of their faith? Some of the things they had to confront because of their faith? Some decision they had to make because of their faith that maybe wasn't an easy decision to make? All right, well, nobody wants to share, that's okay. But I know you have them, don't you? You have them, and you have had them in some ways. Think about Jonathan. Think about this man of God who is willing to let somebody else get the glory. It just seems to me to be a pretty remarkable individual. To me, like David, he's sort of a historical mystery. Where does somebody like that come from? How many people like that have you met in your life? Hopefully, they're all in this room. But the fact is, to see somebody with that kind of integrity, boy, that's pretty powerful, isn't it? Yes, hand up over here.
I had a boss who was trying to muscle me, and he came to me and said, "Why are you still here?" I said, "They'll be good to heaven."
Because why?
I want to help him get to heaven.
So what was he doing?
Talking bad. He was an elder at his church. So I saw this dichotomy because he was this person, but he was acting like this.
Yeah. Which is really what Jonathan's dealing with here, isn't it? My father is the king of God's people. Okay? The enemy is not just in the camp, the enemy's running the camp. One of the enemies. He's running the camp. That's what Jonathan's doing. 32 to 34. What's happening to Jonathan here? What's happening in Jonathan's thinking? You guys ever have an awakening about something? Or come to a realization about something that you maybe didn't want to come to grips with at some point? That's kind of what's happening to Jonathan here, isn't it? All of a sudden he goes, "Ah, man, it's true. How can this be true?" Okay. Again, I'm just trying to put ourselves in Jonathan's way of thinking here. He's a man of integrity. He's a man of true justice, isn't he? What does he say about David when Saul says he should die? Yeah, exactly. What's his crime? Okay? You know, look, you may not like David. He may be not your personality type. You know, he may say things you don't like him to say, but what's his crime? He hasn't committed a crime. In fact, all he's done is good. But that's kind of what Saul doesn't like. He's done all this good and he's gotten everybody on his side. Or at least he's gotten the populace for the most part on his side. So Saul cannot handle that. Jonathan all of a sudden goes, "It's really true. It's really true." So jump down to verses 42 through 42, I think it's just 42. Well, 41 and 42. Read 41 and 42 for us, someone, please.
After the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone and bowed down before Jonathan 3 times with his face to the ground. Then they kissed each other and wept together, but David wept the most. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever.'" Then David left, and Jonathan went back to town.
Jump over for just a minute to chapter 23. We'll come to this later, but I think it's a good thing to throw in at this point. Chapter 23, verses 15 through 18. Mike, you want to read that one too for us?
When David went to Horsh in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horsh and helped him find strength in God. Don't be afraid, he said. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. The two of them made a covenant before the Lord. Then Jonathan went home, but David remained at Horsh.
All right, this little meeting is what's unusual about this meeting here between David and Jonathan? Well, we'll call them rivals. Jen?
He says, you will be king and I will be second to you. And you just wouldn't expect him to say that. But he's such a, he has such a submissive spirit to God's will that everything that's going on around him, which is kind of insane, he is centered on what is right.
Jonathan makes a bold statement here, and you wonder, how does he know this?
Which statement is that?
He says, you're going to be king.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't look like it right now. What makes him say that?
Does not look like it.
Is this an inspiration from God? How does he know that David's not going to end up dead?
Yeah.
But he seems very confident that, no, you're not going to end up dead. You're, in fact, going to be king.
What's the other really unusual thing he says about that?
I'll be second.
I'll be second. What else?
Even his father Saul.
Yeah, Saul knows it. How does, Saul, perhaps in his more lucid, honest moments, knows he's losing. To me, that's a remarkable, and probably only Jonathan would know that, because Jonathan is more intimate. He's his son. He knows what's going on. He maybe hears his father say things in moments of clarity, I guess, is what I would call it. That Saul knows this is going to happen, but he still can't stand it. How does Jonathan get away from Saul has got his troops out there. Jonathan has to sneak off here, doesn't he, to go see David. But this, to me, this particular section here, 23:15, that represents who Jonathan really is. It really, to me, represents who Jonathan really is. If I were to ask you to put a couple of specific characteristics on Jonathan, give me one word to describe Jonathan's character.
Loyal.
Loyal. Okay, that's one of the first ones, isn't it? Even to his father. He's loyal to his father. What else is he loyal to?
God.
Loyal to God, that's the first, and maybe we should put that one first. He's loyal to God, loyal to his father, and
Loyal to David.
loyal to the covenant that he made with David. He's going to make good on his word here. Okay? Loyalty is a great one. What else?
He's humble.
Humble? How would you know that? What is it that illustrates his humility?
Everything we've looked at here this morning, and the fact that he acknowledges to David, hey, you're going to be king. I mean, this is his family that is being taken away from, and he's acknowledging you're going to be king, and I'll be second to you.
Yeah, yeah. Pretty dramatic sense of loyalty, isn't it? Humility. It's like, yeah, you're going to be king. I'm okay with that. Being second, getting the silver medal. Well, it's not quite gold, but it's pretty good. I don't know if that's how he thought about it, but he wasn't going to be king when everything about his father suggested, hey, you should be the king. All right, what else?
He goes against his dad.
Goes against his dad? Yeah, boy. Family ties are pretty strong, aren't they? And they should be, don't get me wrong. Family ties are important. I always love Irma Bombeck. You guys remember Irma Bombeck? She was
Yeah.
Her statement was, family are the ties that bind and gag. Which in some ways, Saul's trying to gag Jonathan, isn't he? He's trying to gag him in a way. But how about bravery? Jonathan was a pretty brave guy, wasn't he? I mean, he was brave even before David came on the scene, wasn't he? He was the one that kind of picked the fight with the Philistines in chapter 13 or 14. He's the one that just goes and just, hey, let's get this battle going. He's not afraid to get in there and mix it up. I think that's why he sees in David, a kindred spirit, even though Jonathan himself was still a little hesitant to go against Goliath. Yeah.
Well, I think along those lines of bravery piece, I'm just imagining sitting at the table and your father literally tries to kill you. I mean, throws a spear at you, attempting to take your life, and you continue to stay with him.
Yeah.
And still speak your piece.
Yeah.
And not run off and hide somewhere.
Yeah.
Thinking, well, he's going to kill me. He's shown me he wants to.
Yeah. And who knows if he's going to have this explosive anger at any time and follow through with it. Yeah. So there's some bravery here, not just in battle, but there's some bravery in doing what he's doing to kind of protect David, isn't it? His father basically tries to intimidate him. You're not going to be the king. Jonathan says, okay, good with that. That's what God wants. Any other? I've got loyal, honest, brave, humble, faithful. Okay? Jonathan is definitely faithful to God, isn't he? Because he can see God is at work in David's life. He just sees the trajectory of how things are going here, and he's okay with that. He's okay with that.
He's rational too.
Whereas
His dad
is not. Yeah. So that's the contrast is pretty dramatic here, isn't it, between Saul and Jonathan? How is it the apple didn't fall very far from that tree, or how it did fall far from that tree?
It's that rebellious woman who mother.
Yeah.
It's always a woman, and it's causing the problem, isn't it? I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay. Just kidding. So, Johnny insists I can have 4 more minutes because I started late. You guys okay? Just very quickly.
The bells probably aren't ringing because of
Daylight savings.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Just think about question 4. I asked the question. Does your faith give you a good perspective when you have to make important decisions? Do important decisions get easier because of faith? How does faith affect your work, play, and relationship decisions? That's, to me, a very good thought based on this chapter, based on who Jonathan is and what he did. So just as you progress in your faith, just keep that in mind. That's the thing that helps you make the right decisions, isn't it? Ultimately, it's your faith. All right. No buzzer. I guess we're done. Thank you.
So nobody